As the IB coordinator, I am part of the pedagogical leadership team. I do regular walkthroughs looking for IB standards and practices in a collaborative, coaching manner. Although I felt I knew a lot about how teachers were evaluated in the building, this was a good exercise for me to see behind the scenes. I learned that each leader in my building has a different process for conducting classroom visits, but they all have the same beliefs around giving relevant feedback in a timely manner. I also learned that while the leadership team had had a conversation in the spring around standardizing the evaluation process, there wasn't much alignment between the UIP, site plan, teacher goals, or school vision. It was more a conversation around who is evaluating whom. This year, each AP is evaluating his or her own grade level group. These are the classes where each AP's students are. Although some staff members might enjoy being evaluated by the same person year after year so the relationship is there, Jeff, my building principal, and the team felt it was okay to receive feedback from different people each year so they could receive multiple perspectives or be viewed through a different lens. Jeff, who is not tied to one grade level, evaluates all of the exploratory teachers, both visual and performing arts, design, physical health, and education. Classified employees are split up based on who works most closely with them. Brian shared his perspective on evaluating classified employees with me, saying he usually asks each person his or her goal and then works backwards from that. There isn't a formal evaluation where he sits and watches the staff member work. He bases his opinions just with an exposure to them and their roles. Sometimes he gets expert testimony. For instance, he may ask the librarian for some insight before evaluating her library assistant. Sometimes he uses data, attendance records, emails, to help him make a judgment on how well each classified employee communicates, works as a team, or deals with conflict management. Due to dates set by the district, secretaries are trusted to schedule goal-setting meetings. This year, many new teachers came to these without an understanding of what to write, so a lot of coaching was done around how to write goals, particularly for other assessments. Because of this, a second check-in with a teacher was often needed so the goal could be approved. APs share their opinion on the goals and encourage staff to use common assessments. They also vet the other assessment goals so they can be as authentic as possible. Once goals have been set, scheduling takes place for pre-conferences, evaluations, and post-conferences. All administrators like to have these meetings within 24 hours of the evaluation. This way they don't forget what they're going to see, and of course, by having the post later in the day or right away the next day, teachers can hear the feedback. Much of the questioning during these meetings aligns with better conversations. The assistant principal will ask me things like, "Tell me about," or "What are you hoping to see during your class today from students?" Or "What will I see? How will you know kids are learning?" And the age-old question, "What would you like me to look for?" It was fun to see all of the different styles of classroom observation. Brian likes to sneak in the room and stay out of the way so he doesn't affect the classroom dynamic. And he is super proud of himself if when he goes to leave, someone says, "Bye, Mr. Wright," and other kids in the class say, "Mr. Wright was in here?" He usually types a handful of things he's seeing and hearing along the way, and sometimes writes some dialogue in the observation tool. He does not give any written feedback to teachers. During the post-conference, Brian hopes that teachers will bring up the same areas of strength and areas for growth that he saw. Brian said, "I feel like observations and evaluations are so subjective that I haven't seen a checklist that's very helpful." He felt checklists were too robotic and wasn't comfortable using them. Brian continued, "Fluid discussion and striking opportunities for improvement or praise are the best fit for my personality." Brian does not look at teacher goals before the evaluation visit, though he may look at them before the post. Jerry rolls into each classroom, as she is in a motorized wheelchair. Although she is hard to miss when she enters a room, Jerry's personality is very different from Brian's. She joins students in their pods, asks lots of questions, supports them with work, and even, admittedly, gets students a bit off track, depending on whose classroom she's in. She has checklists and frameworks she brought with her from her last district, which she has tied to IB practices. She always leaves a written note of what she noticed and wondered, and when she does formal observations, types up feedback for teachers. I observed Jerry using many open-ended questions so that the post-observation was very collaborative between teacher and administrator. Jeff has a similar style to Jerry. He doesn't leave written feedback, but he does use the same formal observation tool as she does. He joins students and even pulls a handful of kids out into the hall in order to hear their thoughts on the class and the teacher. He asks them questions like, "What's your favorite part of this class?" Or, "If there's one thing you would change, what would it be?" Jeff said, quote, "My favorite part is facilitating the conversation. I love it when I can share with teachers what students say about them." Most of the research-based practices can be found in the way each of the evaluators at Mountain Ridge performs classroom observations and gives feedback. All principals take notes about what they saw, observed, noted. All of them ask good questions about what they saw happening, and all of them take into account what had happened before they walked in the room. All of them strive to give feedback in a timely manner. In the article, Providing Performance Feedback to Teachers, a Review, the writers stress these same conclusions. Feedback is better than no feedback, immediate feedback is better than delayed feedback, and feedback that is immediate, specific, positive, and corrective holds the most promise for bringing about lasting change in teaching behavior. In addition, the entire leadership team used relevant questions during their post-observations. Many of these questions were similar to those listed in the feedback process. Finally, all Mountain Ridge administrators are kind and courteous to teachers. They frame conversations carefully and spend much of the post-observation time using open-ended questions. This approach allows teachers to analyze, deconstruct, and then reconstruct their own knowledge, as was mentioned as a good practice in the Killian book. In Better Conversations, Knight states, "The simple act of paying attention to people has a great deal to do with productivity." And later on, the same page, "The more you know about someone else's story, the more you can come alongside them and help them grow." The MRMS leadership team should be commended for opening their hearts to all staff members, for hearing their stories, and for taking the time to get to know everyone in order to give feedback that will be appropriate for each person in his or her development of personal and professional goals. Although all evaluation practices are aligned with research-based strategies, some pieces of the process could be completed with more fidelity. During conversations with both classified and certified staff, I discovered that many don't do anything with the information they receive during their formal evaluation. One classified employee says she has a file that's called Me, and she places the paperwork there. She doesn't give it much thought after that. For teachers, sometimes the classroom evaluation has to be rescheduled due to a more serious building issue. Although teachers understand things come up, they crave feedback. They want their administrator in their rooms. Teachers stated they wanted to be asked questions around data and student growth. More than anything, one teacher said, "I just want my principal to see what I'm dealing with and why getting the results that he wants can be challenging, and that I'm doing the best that I can." A formal evaluation is required by the district, and the Mountain Ridge team does follow those guidelines. However, the team may be able to develop their teachers better if they follow the suggestions mentioned in the article, Feedback for Teachers. Dufour and Marzano's research found that feedback during classroom observations has little impact on student achievement, but there was a subtle shift leadership teams could take to produce different results. Quote, "Administrators who hope to make an impact on classroom instruction are advised to conduct classroom observations by employing several short, unannounced visits, rather than scheduling 1 or 2 full-period observations. It makes sense that administrators can then focus on a limited number of improvement targets throughout the year rather than giving them different improvement targets after each visit." End quote. IB Consulting found that the admin team was pulled in way too many directions to support teachers with classroom instruction that truly grows students. With so many tools available for evaluating classroom instruction and giving feedback that matters, we must always ask ourselves, with what level of fidelity do we use the tools? IB Consulting suggests the following recommendations. Before the school year begins, the admin team may want to remind themselves that above all, we are an IB middle years program. The admin team should sit down and develop a framework they can utilize during the evaluation process around IB philosophy and practices, especially those tied to our site plan. These ideas could be utilized in teachers' personal goals or IB look-fors when doing classroom visits or having discussions with teachers. One example of an IB area for growth is around the IB learner profile, a series of attributes which can be used to build virtuous character. A second IB area, unit planning, relates to planning, preparation, and effective instruction. Administrators could tie questions from Dufour's essential learnings to their discussions with teachers. Finally, IB rubrics, which were created based on the work of Dr. Robert Marzano, should be encouraged for use on the other assessment. This way, admin would be supporting teachers in meeting IB practices while also helping teachers use a well-developed and vetted rubric for feedback. By choosing some IB practices to focus conversations around with all staff, the leadership team will show its ownership of our niche, IB. The admin team should continue to set weekly goals for getting into classrooms so they can give focused, specific, and constructive feedback. This will also help them be more visible to both teachers and students. By getting into classrooms on a regular basis, teachers will feel supported and students will enjoy another interaction with the building leadership team members. In addition, conversations with the teacher after these shorter visits should allow the teacher to be a partner in the interpretation process so the feedback remains constructive. Similar to how principals evaluate classified employees, a third recommendation would be around asking teachers to reflect at the beginning and end of the year using the evaluation of non-administrative licensed staff standards rubric for teachers. This reflection may lead to more meaningful written goals. Rather than asking teachers to look at the entire 34-page document, the admin team could choose a standard or standards, or even just a few elements that align with the school's UIP and site plan. The leadership would find that these elements also relate to the practices required in an IB middle years program. If the admin team uses the teacher evaluation rubric at the beginning of each year in order to focus conversations by having teachers choose just a couple standards, those standards will then be aligned with IB standards and practices, the site plan, and the UIP. Teachers will become knowledgeable about and will be encouraged to support building documents that often live in a file on someone's desktop. Although each building administrator wants to use his or her own process for deciding look-fors and documenting classroom visits, one recommendation would be to use Dufour's 4 questions for essential learning during pre- and post-conferences. These essential learnings connect with the elements required in the IB unit planners. Having answers to these questions may also support the data that is collected for the UIP. If each evaluator uses Dufour's questions, they would be able to standardize and stress to teachers how important it is to plan for activities and learning engagements that truly align with the assessment task or objective for the day and that are tied to student growth. In addition, the conversation may lead to ideas for interventions, differentiation, and personalized learning, which are tactics on the Mountain Ridge site plan. Lastly, evaluators should continue to hone their skills at effectively engaging all teachers in a conversation by using a framework like TrueSpeak or the suggestions in the Better Conversations book. As was stated in the 90-day cycle report published by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, talking with teachers in a targeted conversation are difficult skills that require hours of deliberate practice. So the way we talk to all those who we evaluate should really be something we spend time setting norms around. Finally, if the admin team members work to hone their skills around having better conversations, particularly difficult conversations with the staff, leadership may be able to more strongly establish a culture where they model the behaviors they want to see, grow people, and hold them accountable while respecting all staff and encouraging authenticity. Thank you, Mountain Ridge, for letting me consult with your school.